problem. I kind of need my hands. I'm going to be handicapped this morning, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, we had tech problems all morning. Some of you probably got a notification that service was starting soon at 8:55. Apparently, our system is very eager to start our two-service launch, which happens on the 25th. So the goal for us will be to pilot that and see. Sometimes summers, people are traveling and stuff, so we may go back to one service, come back together over the summer. So we'll see how it goes. Still need some more Kidsman people. Some of you have jumped in, you've signed up, we're very excited. Someone will be in touch with you probably this week to get your background check information and all of that taken care of, but just really grateful for you. I know it's starting to ease some of the pressure. Not all of it, because we still need some more hands, but ease some of that pressure for our team leaders who are responsible for scheduling and staffing those classrooms. And so thank you for stepping in. This two-service lift, for most churches, is one of the hardest lifts that a church can do. And part of the reason is by the time you get to a very large church where you have 3 services, 4 services, or 5 services, which is crazy, you're trying to shift with the smallest amount of people into an extra service, right? So by the time you have 3 services or go to 3 services, you already have 2 full services. You're overstaffed. You got plenty of people to staff a 3rd service. The second shift is usually the hardest lift for churches to make. So it's going to require all hands on deck. It's going to require us to be a family and everyone to kind of come together and serve one another. And it brings together a whole host of needs. But we'll make that lift together. I'm confident that we'll continue to be able to do that. If you want to sign up, the QR code in the seat back in front of you will allow you to do that. Scan that. Just fill out your name there. They will onboard you. We build the curriculum for you ahead of time. We have someone who preps the classrooms so that all of your supplies and everything you need are there for you. Just show up, plug and play, and then bring your excitement, your personality, and your love for the kids. Everything else is handled for you. And so we try to make it as simple as possible so you can really focus on teaching and shaping and loving on our kids. Not be too burdened with having to, you're not writing curriculum through the week or anything like that. We're not going to ask you to do that, even though I'm sure many of you have the skill set to do that. So that's what we need. 2 weeks to go. If any other notifications go out next week, you'll just know, be here at 10:30, because the 25th is when we go to 2 services. So be thinking now, what service is best for you, the 9 or the 10:45? Because like I said last week, I think it was, I'm going to be messing with service times. We're going to try those service times for the first month, and I'm confident that if we move those around, if we have to try to balance out our numbers on Sunday morning. Last thing we want to do is have a full 10:45 and 3 people at the 9. That does nobody any good. The goal here is to create space and allow you to invite your friends without them having to sit on some stranger's lap. And so, see, I can't even drink out of my water here while I'm holding this microphone. It's just going to sit there. I'm going to have to be parched. So that's my first call. This week we continue in a narrative that's been going on with Jesus engaging with the religious rulers. And what's been interesting about this dialogue is Jesus is relentlessly picking a fight with the religious rulers, not because he's a contentious person by nature. Jesus isn't after just fighting for fighting's sake. Some of you know people like that. They just love a good argument. They rush forward the moment there's an opportunity to argue about anything. Jesus is not that kind of person. Jesus is desperately trying to bring truth where the lies of the religious rulers are oppressing the people and keeping them from relationship with God. And so that is something worth picking a fight about. There are things, one of the conversations we have in my home a lot, we've got 13-year-old and 11-year-old, right? One of the conversations we're having now as they mature and as they get older, learn to pick your battles, right? Not every battle is one you need to have. Not every conversation, not every argument is one you need to rush into. Sometimes you can just let it go and be like, hey, this is really, the cost of this is not worth the war that's going to ensue. And so you know what, I'm going to let this one go. I'm going to let this one slide, right? It's not really worth the cost. And Jesus here is going, hey, this is worth the cost. This conversation, what the people need to know about God, this is worth the cost. And so I'm going to pick the fight. Now, what's interesting to me and has always been interesting to me is I kind of have gotten acclimated to rural culture. I'm originally from the North Jersey area and had a stint in my elementary years upstate New York, so got acclimated catching crayfish and making them battle on the back of a Frisbee. And I did weird things as a kid. Catching flies, you ever freeze a fly? Catch a fly, freeze it for like 15 seconds, tie a string around it, and tape it to the table. You've got yourself a pet fly. Yeah, you're learning something today. You knew you were going to today. I have a very colorful past. Jesus saved me from a lot of things. And so I've gotten acclimated to life in rural. And one of the interesting things about life in rural, like we care about national and international news. I mean, with the internet these days, you can't not care. I think 40 years ago, international news was probably not as big of a deal to small rural communities as it was to maybe more urban centers. But now with the internet, we all care about international news, even when it doesn't even affect us, right? Even when I can't pinpoint the country on a map, I'm upset about it. But the thing that I care more about, or the thing that it seems like we as rural people care more about, is the local news, right? We care more about local gossip. We care more about the local conversations happening. I mean, these are just things that affect our everyday lives. There are things that there are people involved in these stories. We know them, right? And whether you're participating in it, you intrinsically know that local communities have a tendency to share local information, news, stories, gossip, right? Like, that's just part of the culture here. We know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knew that person. And the interesting thing that it does to us is it makes us very aware that this is the air that we breathe. Because it's the air we breathe, one of two things has a tendency to happen. One, we have a tendency to be very careful about the image we project, because we know it could make tomorrow's headlines. Maybe not in an actual newspaper, but it's going to be on someone's lips. Right? So we're very careful about the image we project. We want to make sure that we look good at all times. We don't want to share too much, undershare, overshare. We don't want people gossiping or thinking poorly of us. Sometimes some of you grew up and maybe you had a bit of a rough past. You've struggled to escape the person you were in high school, despite the fact that it could have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. People still see you, and that's who they think you are, right? And so that's one of the challenges with living in a culture like this, because you can't always escape it, and you're always aware of how people perceive you. The other side of that is you go, I don't care what anyone thinks. Now, maybe you genuinely don't care what anyone thinks, but the way that we accomplish that is we just decide to reject people before they have the opportunity to reject us, right? So instead of caring what you think and being afraid that you might reject me if I do something wrong, say something wrong, or get caught being authentically myself, and the facade gets peeled away, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to be 100% authentically me, maybe even more authentic than is probably appropriate. Like, that's not really me. I'm just going to be overly bold in my authenticity because I'm already trying to push you away because I know you're going to reject me anyway. And I don't know that either one of those is preferable, right? On one side, the Bible would call that hypocrisy. It's not defined in the Bible the way we often use it, like, oh, he says one thing, but he does another. The Bible would define hypocrisy as acting, as being a stage actor. That's what that word really translates at. When Jesus says, don't do like the hypocrites do and pray on the street corner where everyone can see them, what he's saying is, don't be an actor. That guy who's out there praying, his point is that guy's not really that spiritual. He just wants you to think he is, right? So on one hand, we become actors for an audience. And on the other side, we become immensely bitter, and before someone has the ability to reject me, I just reject them outright, and then I become incredibly in your face about all my dysfunction, because I'm like, go ahead and judge me. Go ahead, right? And Jesus has something better than both of these responses. Both are born out of a fear of rejection. Both are born out of a concern that if I was truly known, the people around me would reject me. If I was authentically me, if I shared every thought that ever popped into my head, if I shared every sin that was buried deep in my soul, if I confessed every dirty detail of what Jesus has saved me from, the world would not receive me. They would judge me and they would reject me. And so because of that, I either pretend or I reject them first. And the gospel has a better path. So that's what we're going to see today. As Jesus continues in his discussion, we're going to see the fourth of Jesus' 7 I am statements in the gospel. Now, if you're with us last week, if you weren't, I'll catch you up. But if you're with us last week, Jesus makes this statement, I am the door. He makes 7 of these I am statements, echoing back to the statement God makes to Moses when he introduces himself. God just simply says, I am. I am, I always have been, I always will be. I am the same today, yesterday, and forever. I am. I simply am. And so when Jesus says this, he's not only claiming to be God, but then he's giving us some attributes that we can ascribe to the type of God that we worship. So when he says, I am the door, he's saying, I am God, and as God, I am the path to salvation. You have to cross through me. Right, so we unpacked all that last week. So that was the third I am statement. This week, we get his fourth I am statement. It's the only one of the 7 I am statements that's really kind of an intimate and personal picture. All of the other ones are these inanimate objects. A door is not a personal thing. You don't have a relationship with a door. You know, as I said last week, you don't have a relationship with light. You don't have a relationship with the different I am things that Jesus identifies, except for this one. This one is intimate. This one is personal. He's going to say, I am the good shepherd. So open up to John chapter 10 with me. We're going to start in verse 11 as we pick up this conversation. Jesus is speaking to the crowds. The religious rulers are there. He just in the last chapter healed a man born blind, and this healing brought about a significant amount of conflict with the religious rulers. They don't like that he's doing this, and they especially don't like that he's doing it on the Sabbath, because for them, he's violating their understanding of how to keep the Sabbath. Now, it's not God's understanding of how to keep the Sabbath. It's a bunch of religious people making up a bunch of unnecessary rules on how to get to God. And Jesus is trying to tear down these religious barriers to say, there is one way to God. I am the door. And so he picks it up in verse 11. This is what he says as he continues to explain who he is to the onlooking crowd. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, we get really interesting picture right off the bat. This idea of good is, I'm going to get in trouble here, probably not a great translation of the word itself. Because when we think of good, we kind of flatten out the meaning of good. And honestly, the word good means absolutely nothing. Like if you went through college, you went through high school, and you had like a really studious, like hard-nosed English teacher, they'd probably hammer you for using words like good. Because it doesn't mean anything. What is good? Right? It's just better than whatever else you don't want it to be. Good doesn't actually have any definition, and for us, we just use it really flippantly, and it's kind of shallow and has no meaning. Jesus' word good here is really more of an authoritative statement. He's saying more like, I am the authentic shepherd. I am the real shepherd. I am the noble shepherd. He's not saying I'm just good, like in the sense of like, oh, he's a nice guy. He is a nice guy, but he's not just nice. He's not good in how we often think about it. He's saying, I am the true shepherd. Now, when we hear something like that, we think about the implication. If he's the true shepherd, then that means there's false shepherds. And he just finished unpacking this last week for us, identifying that there are good and bad leadership. Right? We unpacked this idea that there are thieves and robbers who come. Here's what's crazy. They come to kill and destroy. Thieves don't usually kill and destroy, right? Murderers do that. Usually thieves just come, they sneak in the night, they steal something, they leave. They're not in the murder business. But when you get in their way from getting what they want, that they're taking, that they do not deserve, they resort to murder and destruction. So he's comparing himself with the religious rulers in that statement. But here he's not going to go moral. He's not going to go good versus bad, evil versus righteous. That's not the conversation today. The conversation today is just going to be about what is the true shepherd and what is a false shepherd. Now, I could take the rest of our time together and talk about what it looks like to be a good shepherd. And I don't think that would be a wrong way to preach what we're about to read. I could easily take some time, and we're going to look at some of these verses, but take some time and look at what it means to be a shepherd. We could talk about the sheep. We did a little bit last week about how dumb sheep are. Hate to spoil it for you. We're the sheep. Not a good image for us. Not a good picture when God calls you sheep. When he calls me sheep, it's not a good picture for us. Like, sheep are intrinsically stupid. Now, I don't have any firsthand knowledge, although one of my youth group students years ago broke his finger trying to get the sheep back in the pen. He got his hand caught in the wool, and it just kept going, and he came back to youth group that night, and his finger was twisted sideways. He's like, do you think it's broken? I'm like, get out and get to the hospital. What are you doing here? It was very uncomfortable. But I don't know much about sheep. I've never tended to sheep. I don't even know if I've even pet a sheep. Can you pet sheep? Is that a thing? I'm not even sure if I've laid hands on a sheep, right? But I've done some reading. I've done some research. I've tried to get acclimated as best I can with this kind of context. And apparently sheep are dumber than you might think. They have no sense of direction. None. They will easily wander off and then have horrible anxiety and panic and do a couple of things. One, they'll keep running in the wrong direction, or they'll freeze and just stay put. Some of you are like, okay, maybe I am a sheep. That happens to me at least 3 times a week. I get lost. I call my dad. I'm like, hey, I don't know where I am. Can you get me out of this, right? They have a tendency to not sniff out predators. I don't know if you've seen a sheep. They have nothing to defend themselves. At least goats have horns. They have nothing. They have no claws. They have no major teeth. They can do nothing. They have no ability to defend themselves. And despite that, we got rabbits last year for Easter. It was the worst idea we've ever made. If you're looking for something to put in a stew, you just catch me after and gladly give you our rabbits. I'm kidding. My daughter's getting nervous. She's like, what if somebody does come up to him? No, I'm just kidding. We're not giving away the rabbits, right? But even the rabbits, like, they seem to be able to fight. Like, every once in a while, they go at it. I'm like, ooh, man, they bite. Like, they can be nasty. I was in Royal King one time, and I was like, oh, cute rabbits, like in the cage, and it bit me. Like, you don't bite. Everything eats you. You don't bite on things, right? Like, but it bit me. I don't know. Rabbits apparently can defend themselves. Sheep cannot. And despite this, they have a tendency to wander towards predators and graze near predators. I mean, that kind of relates well, doesn't it? You ever find yourself tiptoeing somewhere you shouldn't? Something that's just waiting to devour you and consume you, but yet we play with it? And then what's most fascinating to me is they'll get led out to pasture and graze, and if a shepherd does not lead them on from where they are, they will graze. They apparently graze really low, like cattle and stuff like that. They graze high, so they eat the grass a little bit higher. The sheep will graze close to the ground, eating the root, and eventually kill the entire field if they're not careful. And they're too stupid to go find more food and will eventually starve. This is not looking good for us. Like, they'll be eating dirt and parasites and eventually die. God confronts his own people at one point and says that they're drinking from empty cisterns who can hold no water. They're drinking dust and they don't even realize it. And we could talk about what the Good Shepherd does. Like, we can look at a psalm like Psalm 23. How do guys do this when they have to hold a microphone? It's a lot of work. Like this is what the psalmist David, King David, would write as he contemplates Jesus or the Lord at that time as his shepherd. He says, "The Lord is my shepherd, therefore I shall not want. He makes me," get this, he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. For even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me, and your rod and your staff are a comfort to me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies, and you anoint my head with oil, for my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Like David is contemplating, the shepherd boy David, who would become king, is contemplating his relationship with God. And I imagine he's sitting out and he's thinking about either his time as a shepherd and what that would look like and how he had to lead the sheep out to greener pastures because they couldn't find them on their own. And when it was time to drink, he had to lead them beside still waters where they could drink, where they might starve and die of dehydration. Like, he's constantly meditating on what God has done for him. And we could go down this road and talk about the Good Shepherd, but here's the thing, I'm not going to do that, despite the fact that I just did it. I'm not going to dig too much deeper into this because I don't know that this text, as it continues, would invite us to do that. I want to stay faithful as much as I can to the text, despite the fact that we could easily spend some time meditating on what it's like for God to be our shepherd. For us to realize that we bring nothing to the table and yet have intrinsic value in the eyes of God. We cannot defend ourselves. We'll make silly and foolish decisions as we wander into danger. That we need him to even lead us to a place in which we can find nourishment for our soul, because we won't even do that on our own. But this isn't where John, our biographer, who's writing John, it's not where he takes this text. Jesus is the true and noble shepherd. And he compares this to something else. Nothing evil, just a hired hand. Take a look. I am the good shepherd, verse 11. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So we begin to find out what the true shepherd does. The true shepherd is going to lay down his life for the sheep. Okay? He's going to contrast this with someone else. He who is the hired hand is not a shepherd, who does not own the sheep and sees the wolf coming, and he leaves the sheep and flees, and the wolf snatches them and scatters them. So this is an interesting picture. Jesus contrasts the true shepherd with the hired hand, right? The hired hand doesn't care for the sheep. The hired hand is there for his pay, and that's it. And at some point, the pay does not balance the danger. At some point, he's got a threshold that he just won't cross, and he's like, hey, that's too far. That's above my pay grade. I don't get paid enough for this. And he bounces. And Jesus is saying that's not the way the true shepherd functions. The true shepherd does not run when it gets hard. The true shepherd does not run or flee. And he's not bagging on the hired hand. Like if you own a business or you work for someone who owns a business, right? You're in one of those two categories. You're either the owner or the employee. You're either the owner and you know what it's like to burn the midnight oil. When everybody else punches out at 4 or 5 o'clock, you're still there. You work weekends, you work late, you get up early. When something goes awry on a holiday, it's your problem. Your employees, they show up and they go home. And if you're an employee, you get that. And if you're acting as an employee like an owner, that feels like an unbalanced equation that your boss is getting more than they pay for, right? Because it's weird when an employee is like, I'm going to take as much ownership over this company, over this project, over this job as my owner does. Now, if you're a Christian, you should work as unto the Lord, right? We should work as worship, and we should give 110% always. But there's a limit. You're paid to do a specific job, and that job falls between the hours of 8 and 4, 9 to 5, whatever that is, and then you go home. And the beautiful thing about being an employee is you don't have to think about the problems over the weekend. You get to go home and enjoy your life. And that's what you're paid to do. If they want to pay you more, you'll do more, right? They want to double your pay or let you take home what the owner takes home. I'm sure you'd be glad to work nights and get up early. But that's not what the hired hand is there to do. So this isn't a moral statement that one is better than the other, that the hired hand is somehow evil or wicked. That was last week's attack on the religious rulers. At this point, Jesus is not making a moral argument against the hired hand. He's simply making a distinction. There are limits to the hired hand's responsibility, but not me. The sheep are mine, and there is no limit. For when the wolf comes to devour, I will pour out my life for my sheep. That's the distinction. Now, the wolf that comes to devour the sheep, that scatters the hired hand, who's like, above my pay grade, that wolf is going to be sin and death. Now, they don't know. His audience doesn't know. They understand the metaphor. They understand the word picture. Yes, we understand shepherds and hired hands. This is part of our culture. We're getting what you're saying, but I don't know that we're understanding exactly what you're saying, Jesus, because they hadn't seen Jesus die on a cross yet. Jesus is here, and he's promising that when sin and death come knocking, it will not be too much. The hired hand will run. The disciples will scatter. But Jesus, in the garden, the night before he's arrested and crucified, he stays. He stays. He stays despite the fact that he asks his disciples to come and pray with him, for his soul is distressed to the point of death. Like, I don't know if you've ever been there. I don't know that any of us have been to where Jesus was, but if you've ever had a point where your heart feels like it's failing inside of your chest, like you're so wrought with distress and under such duress that it just feels like you're dying. Maybe not physically, but emotionally, and then it begins to make its way into your body. Like, this is what Jesus is saying. My soul is under such duress, I feel like I could die. And he drops to his knees and he begins to plead with God. Take this cup from me. But not my will, Lord, yours. He's pleading that God would find another way to save humanity, but at the same time, he's not willing to step outside the will of the Father. And of course he is. Why wouldn't he? We're awesome. Right? Like if we hear the reality of what Jesus has done for the sheep and we're somehow unmoved, it's probably because we have a too high view of ourselves. We assume somehow God owes us, either because of our religious good works, because we're just that intrinsically awesome that God is so lucky to have us on his team. Because we've been told culturally over and over and over again, some of us, our theology goes no deeper than God is love. And he is love. That's a biblical verse. But our application of that concept is well outside the bounds of what Scripture talks about when it says God is love. He loves us despite our dumb sheepness, not because we're so awesome. There's nothing intrinsic about us that has earned his love or requires his love. In fact, he owes us nothing. Like, Please hear that. He owes you nothing. Not your health, not your job, not your paycheck, not the life of your children, not the healthy marriage that you might enjoy, not your physical health, not your mental health, he owes you nothing. He is God, and he is in the heavens, and he does whatever he pleases. And the sheep don't get to say to the shepherd, or the clay doesn't get to say to the potter, what have you done? We have no grounds to argue with the God of the universe. He is beyond us in every way, in every scope, so far beyond our comprehension that it's only in our arrogance that we would think that God owes us something and then try to reason with him. It's the mouse trying to take over the lion's den. And yet, he gives up his life for the sheep. The lower view we have of ourselves and the higher view we have of God, the greater your worship will be as you celebrate the God who bridges a gap beyond our comprehension. We will not find ourselves lowly enough or have a high enough exaltation of God in heaven for us to ever truly understand the depths that God went to reconcile us to himself by giving his own life. Jesus says the hired hand flees, but not me. Despite the great duress that I felt, to the point that he's sweating drops of blood under such stress, he goes to the cross to fend off the wolf of sin and death. And he tells us a little bit beforehand, but we'll see why he does this in the first place. It's not because of our awesomeness. Look at what he says in 14. For I am the good shepherd. I know my own, and my own know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I laid down my life for the sheep. This is a picture of Jesus' possessiveness over his sheep. Do you hear it? He knows his sheep because they're his sheep. This is why he would do this, because if you have surrendered your life to Jesus, you are his. And he would go to great lengths to reconcile you from the clutches of sin and death. And then he says something really a little scary and maybe a little bit comforting. He knows his sheep as the Father knows the Son and the Son knows the Father. So too Jesus knows his sheep. We'll get into this next week. There's this doctrine in Christianity called the Trinity. It's tri, meaning three, unity, 3 in 1. It's God the Father, God the Son, God the Spirit, 3 in 1. Not 3 separate gods, not God putting on a different mask. He's God the Father 1 minute, he stops being God the Father to become God the Son, and then he stops being, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a mystery so profound that it could only define our God. He's 3 in 1. We'll dive into this next week when Jesus says, I and the Father are one. But if that's true, then there's nothing the Father doesn't know about the Son, and there's nothing the Son doesn't know about the Father. And if the Son knows you the way he knows the Father, he knows everything about you. So that's both terrifying and comforting. Isn't it? Look, you've got people in your life you're incredibly close with. People you can trust, people that hold you accountable, people you can confess to, people you're honest with. None of us are completely honest. None of us want our deepest, most inner thoughts put up here on a projector and shown to the world. We're uncomfortable with God even seeing them, aren't we? If we're really honest. If you let yourself sit there for a moment and allow those thoughts to flood your mind, the things you've done you hope no one ever finds out, the things you've thought that you pray never become public, right? Like, none of us want those things made public. You pray against them, you rebuke them, maybe you confess them to a close confidant, maybe you just pray privately that Jesus take those things from you. We've got parts of our story that we don't talk about. Yeah, some things make for a good testimony, but that one might get out and around town and people might misunderstand and they might not realize, so we just don't talk about it. You let those things flood your thoughts for even a second, and you begin to realize how uncomfortable it is to be known fully. And then we begin to understand why our default mechanism is to pretend, to be better than we are, more righteous than we are, more holy than we are, more put together than we are. And Jesus knows it all. So I got a couple of verses. There's more that I could read, but I got a couple of verses talking about God's knowing of us. In Psalm 139, 1 through 4, he says this: "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways, all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether." The prophet Jeremiah would say this: "I, the Lord, search the heart and test the mind to give every man according to his ways, according to the fruit of his deeds." The author of Hebrews would write, "For the word of God is living and active, sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of joints and of marrow, and discerning the thoughts and intentions of the heart. And no creature is hidden from his sight, but all are naked and exposed to the eyes of him to whom we must give an account." That's uncomfortable. You see, Adam and Eve, when they came into the garden, they were naked and unashamed until they sinned. And then their eyes were opened and they realized they were naked and they were ashamed. And so they clothed themselves, as we often do. But not before God. He sees through it all. He knows it before it's on your tongue. He discerns our thoughts from afar. We stand before him naked and exposed. There's no way to stand arrogantly before God and think somehow he owes us anything when that's the reality, when we're truly honest about all the things that live within us. And yet, the Good Shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. He doesn't lay down his life for a better churched-up version of you. He doesn't lay down his life for a future version of you that somehow in my mind, I always have it more together in the future. Like, I don't know, in my 20s, I thought by the time I hit my 30s, I'd have it more figured out. My 30s, I thought I'd be in my 40s and have it all figured out. I'll let you know when I get to my 50s, but somehow in my 50s or 60s, I'm going to have it all figured out. And I've talked to some of you in your 50s, 60s, and beyond, and you still are like, I don't have it all figured out. Somehow, it's easier for me to believe that God loves a future version of me that's well put together than the version of me today. Maybe today I'm having a good day. That's an easy version of me. Wait till I get behind somebody on the Frenchville-Shawwell Highway going 10 miles an hour under the speed limit when I'm late to get to Clearfield. And that version of me is hard to love. Fair? Just me, okay. None of you have. Right? It's easier to believe he loves a future version of you than the one sitting in the seat today, who was fighting on the way to church, trying to get the kids out the house and get their hair combed down, something sticking up in the back, licking it down on your kid's head, which, by the way, is super unsanitary. We all do it, but it's like, might as well just lick your kid's face. I mean, what are we doing? Right? And he loves you in the state you're in right now and died for you as you are, because you are his. You are his. And he lays down his life for the sheep. Let's continue. We're almost done. 15. No, 16, sorry. "And I have other sheep that are not of this fold. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. So there will be one flock and one shepherd. For this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life that I may take it up again. For no one takes my life, but I lay it down of my own accord. For I have authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it up again. This charge I have received from my Father." Now, I think we sometimes think that Jesus Okay, so we're talking about Jesus loving you and laying down his life for you. And I think sometimes we think that Jesus was just a victim of these horrible circumstances, that like he continued to agitate the religious rulers and they eventually catch him. Like he kind of evades them for the most of his ministry, but then one day he gets unlucky, he's in the garden, and all of a sudden they catch him. They're like, haha, we got you. And they bring him and he's powerless as he's dragged before an illegal trial 3 times at night and then dragged before a Roman governor, and then he's crucified against his will. But it's okay because God gets some good stuff out of it, right? Out of this thing that was beyond Jesus' control, God saves humanity. But guess what? Jesus is not out of control. He's not like you and I that are sometimes a slave to our circumstances, right? We might have the power of how we respond to our circumstances, but not every circumstance is going to be within our control. And for those of us who wrestle with control, we know that all too well. Our inability to control everything causes us severe anxiety. But that's not Jesus. He's not at the mercy of life's circumstances. He wasn't at the mercy of the religious rulers who would scheme their way into getting him arrested. He lays down his life willingly, by choice, for the sheep. And then with the authority he had to lay it down, not as a slave to his circumstances, he is also no longer a slave or not a slave to death, because he takes it up again. Death could not hold him. It had no power over him. It has power over you and me, doesn't it? Not him. He takes his life up again, standing in the face of death and saying, open up the gate and let me out. And it obeys. Even death obeys God in the flesh. He says, I have other sheep that are not of this fold. He's talking specifically to religious Jews, ethnic Jews. But as we discover, and we'll talk about in the coming weeks, as we take a break from this series and begin to look at some of the mission of the church. The mission of the church was to preach the gospel far and wide to more than just ethnic Jews. The Jews were called to usher in the good news of Jesus, to bring about the forerunning and the foundation of what the Messiah would do, and then to expand it beyond the borders of Judaism, to bring it to the ends of the earth, so that you and I could hear the good news of Jesus Christ. Now, there's 2 responses that John, our author, is going to highlight in Jesus' audience. And I think those 2 responses are the same 2 responses we could have to this news today. Look at 19. There was again a division among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said, he is a demon and is insane. Why listen to him? And others said, these are not the words of one who is oppressed by a demon. Can a demon open the eyes of the blind? The first group rejects this outright. They just reject it outright. They don't even think twice about it. They don't even think about how illogical their rejection is. Maybe that's you this morning. Maybe you were brought here by a friend, and your natural inclination to anything religious, Christian, is to just reject it. Not even to go into depth and try to figure out if there's any truth to it. There's no intrigue in you. There's no question of whether or not this thing could be true, whether or not there's validity to anything we're talking about, whether or not this book has any historical validation or not. You're just going to reject it outright, and you're going to use some lame excuse. I would just ask you not to. You're welcome to reject it. Just don't use a lame excuse. It drives me absolutely insane when people say dumb things. Like, if you want to reject it, just reject it and just own it. Just own it. I don't want to give my life to Jesus. Okay. Don't grab hold of a cultural cliche that has zero depth to it because it sounds like a good reason to say it. I don't want church. I'd rather my sin. I'd rather it not interrupt my life. That's fine. That's fine. You don't have to. But don't say dumb stuff. Wow, the Bible's filled with contradictions. Point one out. Go ahead, I'll wait. Well, Christians are hypocrites. Yeah, you're going to love it here. Are you not one? Start your own club. You're probably going to be an only member. You're going to fit right in with us. Yeah, we're broken people. Yeah, give me another one. Just don't say dumb stuff. If you want to reject it outright, just reject it outright. Religious rulers come up with some ridiculous, illogical excuse because in the end, they just don't want to give up their power and their sin and their leadership over the people. It's good for business, it's good for their ego, and they just don't want to surrender their life to God. Fine, that's fine. I get it. Sin's fun, I get it. Go chase it. It'll lead to death, but you're free to do that. The other group of Jesus' audience are intrigued. Something doesn't sit quite right. They can't quite put their finger on it. They haven't gotten to the place that the blind man did a number of weeks ago, who's standing right there for all of this. As Jesus is saying, my sheep know my voice, the blind man's going, I've been blind my whole life. The only thing I knew was your voice. They're not quite ready to go, my king and my God, but there's something about this guy that's not adding up, and it's not sitting right in my gut, and I need to know more. That's the other group. There's an intrigue. Like if you're a believer in here, if you follow Jesus, let there be an intrigue of there's got to be more. Not more outside of Jesus, but there's depth that I've yet to mine. There's more to this book than some shallow reading. There's more to my walk with Christ than maybe I'm getting out of it right now. I want more, and I want more. Like if you're going to be greedy for that. There's intrigue. There's just something different than the rest of the world has to offer. There's just something unique about this man, and it's not sitting right, and I need answers. Chase him. Because that's the spark that will not only lead to salvation, but ultimately lead to a deeper walk with Christ. He is the true shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep. Nobody else can say they've done that for you. Nobody else knows you completely and loves you fully. Everybody else traps you in this place of bitterness and rejecting others before they reject you, or hypocrisy, playing a part, looking in the mirror and knowing that's not, if they knew me, they would reject me. I know they say they love me. I know we're friends, but if they truly knew the depths of my soul, clearly they wouldn't stick around. If all my ugly came to the surface, I would be rejected, but not Jesus. He knows you better than you even know yourself. And he has received you and even died for you to make you whole. It should not be odd for Christians to raise their hand and say, I'm a sinner. To be the most authentic and bold people. Not because we're putting it in other people's face and just waiting for them to reject us out of our own bitterness or fear. Not because we have to play the plastic part. It's always odd to me. I don't know that this is a major issue for us, but if you've been around church circles for any length of time, right, it has a tendency to become a really plastic, fake place. Maybe that's why you would reject Christianity outright. You're like, Christians are just fake. That only happens when we don't grab hold of the beauty of the gospel. You are fully known and fully loved and free to be completely you, because when everyone else leaves, Jesus stays. And amongst people who've already raised their hand and said, broken sinner, need a perfect Savior, we should be free to be ourselves. That's the practical implication of what the gospel does for us in this moment, of having a good shepherd who lays down his life for the sheep.